important session. Important because road transport does contribute 12% to India's energy-related carbon dioxide emissions. Globally, about 1/5 of all greenhouse gas emissions comes from the road transport sector. So transitioning mobility to clean sources and clean technologies will be a key part of the world's climate efforts. To address that, we do have an eminent panel of experts. They've pioneered various aspects of this transition in the country. So let me begin by addressing the key theme around green mobility these days. And I believe in the last 1 year or so, what we've seen happen is that while electric vehicles do remain the centerpiece of this transition to net zero emissions, what's equally a point of focus now is other forms of alternate fuels, whether it's hybrids, hydrogen, LNG, CNG, and the entire gamut of technologies that come with that. So let me address that to you, Anand. Heavy trucks do contribute the vast majority of carbon dioxide emissions from the road transport sector. So therefore, there is a pressing need to decarbonize that sector as quickly and urgently as possible. Your company does facilitate LNG, refueling, manufacture LNG trucks. Tell us what the challenges are with that technology first, because we do import natural gas, and it is a fossil fuel at the end of the day. But do you see that it is a solution that works in the long term, given the other technologies like EVs and hydrogen are perhaps still not very viable in the segment?
Thank you. But yes, I agree with you, Alicia. Decarbonization of road logistics is extremely important, especially when India is having a 4 million heavy-duty truck market. LNG is a good alternative that we have found and we believe would work in India, because natural gas has been there for over a decade in the form of CNG. And LNG is also a good form which reduces for all long-haul heavy-duty cargo movement across India by about 30 to 40% of carbon dioxide, and which is very, very significant. So while we are all talking about EV vehicles being deployed, hydrogen vehicles being deployed in the future, which is, we believe, clearly at least 5 to 10 years away or is in the making, LNG is a very good alternate transition fuel which is decarbonizing the road logistics and is very, very effective on all other gaseous forms as well. So we've been deploying these vehicles, over 500 vehicles we've deployed in the last year or so. And we found that anything long haul, anything from a sustainability point of view, these vehicles are much more advanced, robust, and much better fuel than diesel for sure.
Right, thank you for that. A lot of government focus in its decarbonization efforts has gone towards public transport, and rightfully so. It is used by the vast majority of our population, and buses are also, large footprint vehicles, so there is a need to decarbonize those as well. Aanchal, the government's run very comprehensive electric bus programs. There is a lot of effort that's gone towards aggregating demand for these vehicles from various state governments. How would you evaluate the success of these programs? City buses is, of course, where the large part of this effort has been concentrated. But still, the numbers that we sell, are pretty low. And the other aspect of this is also addressing the infrastructure issue, the charging that powers these buses. It's still, the vast majority comes from non-renewable sources. So how do you lead the integration of green electrons to electric vehicles as well?
So I think firstly, thanks to Mint for organizing this platform today. Now, when we talk about electric buses and the government initiatives in launching these electric buses, it is true that government has worked really hard to bring the electric buses, even though we have, say, 7,000 buses on road which are electric currently. But had those initiatives not been taken, I don't think we would have reached even the level where we are today. I think GCC, there are people who like GCC and there are people who don't like GCC, but had it not been for GCC, I think it would have been very difficult.
Could you explain what GCC is for the audience?
GCC is basically gross cost contract. So when the electric buses were launched in India, an average electric bus, say of an average length, which is 9 meters, was more than a crore, right? People had been used to buying buses that were 40 lakhs. So if you were to tell STUs, hey STUs, buy 100 buses for 100 crores, I don't think that would have led to any progress anywhere. So Niti Aayog came up with something called as gross cost contract model, under which an OEM had to both manufacture and operate these buses. Now, it was a lot of work for the OEM because we were traditionally manufacturers and we were being asked to manufacture, raise capital and operate these buses. So a lot of work went into all of those things. But I think most of the OEMs were successful or were able to do this successfully. In fact, PMI was the first one to do 700 buses, which was the biggest number that had seen in these initial contracts. So over time, the demand aggregation that you've talked about, initially these were launched under FAME, where we wanted to bring down that 1.5 crore price to a smaller or a lesser price so that this could become viable. But over time, because of demand aggregation in economies of scale, the bits that are discovered for these operations are now similar to what were being discovered with the subsidies. So in that sense, subsidies are never like a long-lasting viable solutions, but over time, because of aggregation, because of putting the demand together, we've reached a stage where we believe, at least in the intra-city state transport sector, those subsidies, at least from a manufacturing point of view, are not that needed. And we may want to move to other bus sectors like the school buses, office buses, intercity buses, where we might see fresh need for these subsidies to make the viability for those products. But having said that, yes, the electric buses don't run on a green grid yet. The infrastructure is not a challenge for us, at least in the GCC contracts. Like, to give you an example of DTC is going to have 5,000 odd electric buses in the coming few years. What happens under GCC is we are given a site, we are given a depot, where the electric connection is also provided by the government till, the depot site. You have to just go put in chargers there, or you have to just do minimal electric infra work. Now, that is not a green grid yet. There are conversations on how we can make that. I think Tata Power B here has been pitching some programs which may be able to install at least solar cells or something like that. So that's something that will be, say, stage 2. It's still in stage 1 where we are getting things done. The depots are starting. Even getting the electric connection is not that immediate yet. But next stage will work towards making this move green, I think.
Right, thank you. Anmol, Blusmart is a brand a lot of us have interacted with already. And apart from the fact that the cabs are clean, they come on time, there is no surge pricing per se, so you know what you're paying for. The biggest piece of your business, of course, is that you run an all-electric fleet and about 8,000 cars at present. So talk to us about your experience of using electric vehicles as cabs. For the passenger vehicle segment, I believe there is a lot of uncertainty that creeps in buyers' minds because they don't know after 5 years what their electric vehicle battery is going to be like, what kind of residual value they're going to get for the car they have bought. But of course, cabs run for vast periods of time, through the entire day. It requires an infrastructure that has to work all the time and products that can withstand such usage. So how has your experience been of running Blusmart with thousands of cabs so far? And is it a successful model that others can perhaps follow too?
Thanks, Amisha. I think it's a mixed bag. We're not very happy. We're not very sad. Somewhere in the middle. The good parts have been that battery life, which people thought will run away or batteries might conk off after 70, 80, 90,000 kilometers, I think that is performing much better than what we thought. We have today enough number of vehicles who have touched the 200,000 kilometer mark. So that I think has been a positive which is there. We have, where I would have said is negative is that heat degradation is still very severe. When in this summers we touched 50 degrees plus, we had 1,000 vehicles which were off-road. We couldn't put them on the road at that time. So I think we saw thermally, I think the degradation is still, it just it cannot work at 45 degree, 48 degree plus. It becomes very tough to operate. It's very tough for the driver, very tough for the customer to operate at when the temperatures are above 45, 47 degrees. So I think that I thought could have been much better managed. On residual value, I think it's been a fair bag again. To put you in perspective, the first cars that we had in 2014, and mind you that model was Mahindra e-Verito, which is not a running model now. So generally for vehicles which are out of now business, in a way the residual value drops. We have been able to secure a 20% plus RV on them. If I look at Tata Tigors, which have crossed 4 years, we are getting about 26-27% RV. We are actually happy.
How would that compare to an IC engine or a traditional petrol or diesel cab or a CNG cab?
No, so it depends from vehicle to vehicle. So for example, if you have an Innova and you run an Innova for 4 years, you could pretty much sell it still at 40%. But to say that people had actually think about electric vehicles, the expectation. So most of my leasing has happened at 10% RV. Whereas we actually now have started to make a profit on RV because we are getting 26-27%, which is 15% above what we thought. So this is despite the steep fall in battery prices, extremely steep fall in battery prices. So despite that, RVs are holding, so that's also turning good. But overall, I think slightly disappointed with no new real models coming, still the old things. It's still the old MG ZS, it's still the old Tata Tigor, nothing really excited, just 4, 5, 6 models. I would have loved 25 models to be in the town, but it's not there.
Right. So do you think that this is a demand-led issue? Because while Blusmart is, I believe, the largest fleet of its kind, it's 8,000 vehicles, right? So for any manufacturer to feel encouraged to...
I think Mint only covered the quote which when I said we are sitting with a 10,000, if somebody is willing to make a 250-kilometer car at an 8 lakh price, tomorrow morning we'll write the check.
Right.
I think when I said it for the first time, Mint only covered it.
Right. All right. So manufacturers are not coming up with enough models that would be a dampener for you.
Yeah,
and
I would say the only sad part about the entire thing is that the ecosystem play, what we would have thought is not as much happening as what should have happened.
Why do you think that is the case? If there is a market for models like that, what is preventing manufacturers from launching them or making them?
Many theories. Some people say people don't want to move to EV. Some people say adoption is not happening. Globally, if we see EVs are running into a headwind, most EV stocks are down 90%. So I think it's a tough market. I think the OEMs, what I understand is that when the very initial adopters, all of us who are the initial adopters, when they came in, they thought they just extrapolated the curve. कि यार ये अभी 2% adoption हुई है, ये 5 हो जाएगी, ये 20%, 2030 तक 20% adoption पे पहुंच जाएंगे. आज बात करने जाएं, if we speak today to, I think nobody will say 2030, even if 10% adoption can happen on 4-wheel, will be a tough task. Maybe buses and 2-wheels can do better, but at least on the 4-wheel. So maybe the adoption is not coming as fast. But it's a chicken and egg. आप model देखिए और adoption आएगी.
Right. Absolutely. Correct. So actually that allows me to segue very nicely into my question for you, Harsh. It is true that EV sales globally, while they're not really declining, the vast majority of the growth we're seeing in EV sales is coming from China. Right, where the market is very competitive. In markets like ours, we have seen a definitive moderation in demand for EVs. There is skepticism around it now. And the fascinating point is it's happening when we've not even touched that inflection point, or we're only at about 2% electric vehicle penetration, and already there is a lot of skepticism in the market. What do you think is driving that? Why are people apprehensive about buying into EVs?
Multiple factors to the question that you've raised in terms of demand side, right? So I think if you look at any new technology, there are clearly early adopters, right? That drive that initial surge in demand and acceptance. So we saw some of that, and to the point just made in terms of that leads people to believe that trajectory will continue, right? So I think some of it is clearly that the early adopters have led to certain demand. But there are many other facets that also lead to skepticism in terms of why that demand isn't continuing, right? So it's not only the technology that's behind it and the cost behind that, as you know, as you suggested, the cost is coming down, but there are things around range anxiety, right, which to a degree have been solved for, but still exist. There are things around the fact that it still takes much longer to charge a vehicle than it is to fill a gas tank, right, and at a fuel station, right? So, so charging infrastructure clearly is also very much, confined to city centers and a few cities at this stage. So I think there are multiple factors in terms of that are leading to adoption or leading to a version of that adoption that you see that all of them need to be solved for. Markets like China clearly a lot of those facets both either led by government incentives, right, everything from infra side, from a demand side incentives, you are seeing a lot of that money being pumped in, right? Clearly it's also a government mandate in India, just like it was in China, to look at looking for fossil fuel substitution, right? So and how do you encourage some of that substitution as well? So I would say there are many facets that need to be solved for that adoption to take on and pick up. But generally, I also want to mention that car sales globally are on a decline. So while as a percentage of that, EV is still I would say higher, albeit from a lower base. But generally, in the past 9 to 12 months, you've seen quite a subdued demand for cars generally, right? So it's not just EVs that are under stress.
How would you assess the global economy's response to this sort of realization that the EV transition curve's not going to be as exuberant as we all thought? We have seen that, some governments are tempering their IC phase-out targets. They're talking about more realistic scenarios, but do you think that, for instance, the Paris Agreement and the net zero emissions, scenario it talks about and what the government pledges are, do you think they're all coming together now? Do you think there will be some sort of a convergence that will happen?
So I think, again, a few things. Firstly, there are alternatives to EV from a sustainability perspective, right? So that's the other realization. And it depends on, again, and at the same time, there are also a lot of lobbying forces that come into play in terms of pushing certain types of fuels. So I think you're seeing multiple alternative fuels also coming into the picture, which is which is leading to either the adoption or the lack thereof when it comes to EV. I think if you talk about India specifically, clearly there are certain what I would say bridge technologies that will come in, right? So hybrid is being pushed to a certain degree. CNG clearly is something that's been in the mix for a while and continuing to be pushed on, by government and by state government specifically. At least in certain use cases, that's very true. So my sense is EV adoption in India probably still at that rate. It started with two-wheeler, three-wheeler. You're seeing that still continue. To Anmol's point earlier, in terms of from OEM reaction, I think at least the two-wheeler, three-wheelers, they are starting to come up with certain models because they see promise there, right? Passenger vehicle, as I said, each of these OEMs have committed to certain technologies and they drive a narrative around that, right, as being the more efficient, the cleaner version. So it's a lot, because there are a lot of costs involved when it comes to which technology you're committing to. So it's not very easy for them to move from one to another.
Absolutely. And I believe in the case of heavy trucking as well, manufacturers now have to really, while they all of them say that they're preparing for multiple technologies, one does have to sort of figure out and choose where they want to put their money in, where viability is going to come from. And some of that is going to be dictated, perhaps a large part is going to be dictated by the infrastructure development as well. If we talk about hydrogen, for instance, which is talked about as a fuel, very amenable to be used in long-haul trucking, the fact is, for all of that, there is very little to show for in terms of dispensing infrastructure. So while technologies can be commercially ready, there is no infrastructure yet. So how do you really solve for that chicken and egg problem? And what is the long-term view that you have for decarbonization of the heavy-duty trucking sector?
So, as you rightly said, that hydrogen is still in the making. Hydrogen dispensing is definitely a lot of concern. Moving hydrogen as a fuel from pump to pump is also still in the making. The trucks, also the OEMs are working onto it, and they are still working across the globe on the said subject. But it will come, maybe in a decade's time or so, as I said, 5 years to 10 years. Surely technologies are moving forward and it will come. But today, we believe that all short haul, on account of heavy duty truck movement for decarbonizing road logistics, would be done by EV. 150 kilometers range of movement of any heavy duty vehicles would be done by EV, as well as all long hauls, say up to 1,000 kilometer range, 2,000 kilometer range, or 500 plus kilometer range. It would all move on LNG because that's a very good transition fuel which can easily be moved. We are at it from the last 2 to 3 years. LNG, we are seeing that there are so many LCNG stations all across India. CNG pumps are there, LNG comes over there, gets converted, so easily adoption can be done. A lot of pumps have are there in the pipeline by IOCL, HPCL, GAIL. We ourselves, in order to create the whole ecosystem, created the pumps in the name of Ultra Gas, and we started off our journey with that. And yes, but if you want to decarbonize the road logistics as what we are planning in 2030, that we should reduce at least 30% of that. And as we know, in the automotive sector, about 70% of the carbon dioxide is emitted by heavy duty trucks. Uh, LNG is a good way forward for decarbonizing road logistics for all long haul sectors, heavy duty vehicles, and EV would be a good benchmarking for all short haul vehicle deployment, port movement, short haul vehicle deployment, in plant movement. It could be done. Definitely, I would not like to talk about a lot of incentives being given by government because incentives don't last for long. And if you have to make a sustainable model, you have to make it workable within itself. So, but yes, if the governments can help, that if you want to develop EV vehicles more in India and reducing the oil bill, something can be passed on for toll, something like on a wheeling banking can be done where you can connect your EV chargers with renewable, where you can also proudly say that you've actually gone green rather than deploying it with thermal charging, which can be done. So if some push is given on those lines, definitely that can be done. Plus financing is definitely a huge concern on alternate fuels on today's date in the country. No banks, nobody wants to finance it very easily. So if that could be looked in appropriately by the government, a small push can be given over there, I'm sure adoption can be done in a much better form.
Right, so that's an interesting point about financing. I think that was seen a lot in the case of EVs, buses, and all kinds of vehicle segments there. But at least there's some effort, there to address that. But I also want to ask you that in the case of CNG, let's say, when we did see prices go up for CNG, there was a very marked decrease in sales for CNG trucks, and that entire transition moved back towards diesel. So do you see that there can be scenarios like that that can affect let's say LNG vehicles as well in the future? And for that, then what will drive growth in these segments beyond corporate mandates? Because right now that's what's moving trucking into these alternative fuels.
So two things. I mean, gas prices definitely has gone up in comparison, but if you see the last 15 years of gas pricing and diesel price variation, gas is always been cheaper than diesel, for sure. The overall TCO is more beneficial in LNG in comparison to CNG because being a better fuel, having a better calorific value in comparison to diesel, we find a better fuel mileage over there. So overall TCO benefits are much better. Even if there is a little bit of a correction which is done, because if you see a difference between a CNG and an LNG price today, when it is dispensed, it's not too much. And if you calculate from that point of view with the capital cost, the TCOs are fine. Uh, Not very great, but it is fine, I would say. Uh, I'm sure gas prices will not go up too much because the government also wants a gas on gas based economy in the country. They are very much looking forward for decarbonizing road logistics. EV is definitely a much more expensive proposition, so but it will come without a doubt. Uh, so we believe that it's overall good to buy these vehicles, deploy it, and overall TCO benefit for all the logistics companies would be good. All the corporates are definitely supporting it because everybody has a mission and vision to reduce down the scope 3 emission levels. And nobody in the right mind would say that if you can reduce 30% less carbon dioxide at the same price of diesel, we want to pollute more. So definitely any form of decarbonization for scope 3 level reduction is very well welcomed by all the corporates. And we've deployed these vehicles today, whether you say in steel, cement, FMCG, chemical, all industries, we are deploying these vehicles continuously, and we find a very warm welcome, and we are very happy to see that warm welcome from our customers and all the fraternity as well.
Right. In the case of electric buses, as Aanchal you pointed out, the technology being so new, the technological know-how not being there with the STUs, the OPEX model was considered a good one to try and get demand for these vehicles going. The government has also set up a payment security mechanism to ensure that payments come back to OEMs in time. Despite that, we do see apprehension from some OEMs to, calibrate their production because, the flow of incentives from the government sometimes takes time, and those are, that's a significant amount of money that OEMs need. And as it is, manufacturing EVs is not really profitable from the get-go, so you need that money to come into you at the right time. Do you think that there is some improvement happening on that front, or do you think that there is a lot more that needs to be done to streamline the flow of incentives that comes to you, and perhaps even from the STUs ends, does there need to be a lot more tightening than what we've seen so far?
So just to clarify, last two tenders that have come, like all the tenders that have come in the last 2.5 years have had no incentives in the EV bus space. All FAME subsidies for EV buses have not, have dried up, or have the program has sort of ended. And in fact, the prices that have been discovered without subsidies in the EV bus space are in fact less than the prices that were discovered with the subsidies in the EV bus space.
How does that happen?
Because of economies of scale, because of streamlining production, because of doing better value chain, because of, say, investments we've made 150 crores worth of investments on localization as PMI. So because of that increased localization, where your custom duties get cut off, initially the tender used to come for 50 buses, now tenders are coming for 5,000 buses. So I don't think, at least from our perspective, our production is not linked to subsidies or incentives anymore. Even, again, from an intra-city bus perspective, it is not something that we think OEMs need or are looking forward for. Yes, to, as I said earlier, to get the demand going in a new electric bus sector, like an intercity or school bus, that might be, because the TCO for a school bus does not work the same way as the TCO for a intra-city bus. So that can be a different conversation one might want to have. Now, the second part of your question was whether, the payments from the governments are coming on time or not coming. Again, it is not the OEM that gets those payments. And same for subsidies. It's not the OEM that gets the subsidies. It is the operating company which is formed subsequently that operates these buses and signs the concession agreements with the government that gets both the subsidies as and when they would have come, and the operation, when they operate the buses, the money that comes for that. Now, to give you an example, when the CNG buses were operating in Delhi, I think they were operating close to 100 rupees per kilometer. Electric buses that are going to get launched in Delhi, in fact, PMI's electric buses are going to get launched in Delhi by, I think, end of this week or early next week. That is 56 rupees per kilometer. So that's where electric buses have become a viable product for the STUs. Imagine for every kilometer that the Delhi government is going to run these buses, they're going to save 50 rupees. These buses run 200 kilometers every day, 364, because they don't run Holi and Diwali, so 364 days a year for 12 years. And imagine they're going to run 5,000 buses. So the calculation is expected, a lot of deficit for the STUs that are running these buses is going to get over because of switching to electric fleet. So that's going to be another source of revenue or funding that's going to be available, just because you have to pay less to run your transportation. That's going to come forward. Payment security mechanism, amazing, great, yet to be completely rolled out, but has given the investors, the banks, the finances a lot of confidence and a lot of comfort. Personally, we've been wise, and cities where we choose to operate and so on, we've not faced a lot of challenges. Yes, the first payment can sometimes take time because it's new for everyone. It's new for us, it's new for them to figure out how this whole process works. But again, your question was why are other OEMs not coming or have shown reluctance? I cannot speak for them, but we've been quite, sorry. We've been quite actively participating, and we have been working very strongly. Our biggest focus has been on how to make this product cheaper and how to make it more viable even in other segments. That is what our energy is heavily focused on.
Sure. Anmol, what have your learnings been from setting up an electric charging infrastructure for your fleet of electric cars? Right now, a lot of the conversation around what hinders EV adoption is around charging. So you have clearly set up a lot of chargers, and you have to make sure that they work. Otherwise, of course, the system collapses. So what have been the learnings there? And if you can also talk to us about the challenges that you have encountered while setting up charging. Does the grid support, charging enough at this point in time? The maintenance of chargers itself is another issue that we hear of. Fast charging, for instance, is a technology that needs to be used responsibly. What have some of your experiences been behind putting up a charging infrastructure?
So I think if I go to 2019, when we started, charging was the single biggest problem. 2024, charging is the single biggest problem. No real big, despite setting up thousands and thousands and thousands of chargers, it is still the big problem which is there. The problem that time also was land and load. Today also the power is land and load. There is definitely, and this is not an India problem, this is a global problem. Globally even more acute than India. So today, if at certain degrees of adoption, when it hits 10, 15, 20%, we will need to invest in beefing up the distribution and transmission infrastructure. This current distribution and transmission infra cannot take the load of so many EVs joining the grid. So that will be maybe at some time, in my opinion, you saw a 2% adoption wave, we will consolidate, get to a 10% adoption wave in a few years. We will again consolidate because maybe that time EV industry is not the constraint, but charging and distribution is the constraint, and then there will be another leap which will be there. So I think, charging infra is still the biggest issue, and two main factors, land and load, which is the big problem always.
So what gives
sorry,
it?
One thing
Sure.
I wanted to add, if you do a B2G project, land doesn't become a problem anymore.
Correct.
What do you think will give in this scenario? Does the government need to intervene? Should there be a comprehensive policy to ensure there is grid upgradation?
Technology will solve for it. I'm not expecting the government to come and say we are going to give you, of course, whatever distribution infra. No, it is actually revenue accretive for the distribution company. You set up more, give me more load. Let's say today, Reliance and Tata in Delhi were to say, Anmol, you have infinite load to set up charging stations. Day one, they will make money on all the investments they make.
I'll check that. Maybe the other one.
Day one, sorry, this is so they'll make a lot of money on it, because as soon as if we set up a charger and it's being utilized at the utilization levels of Blusmart, everybody makes money because so much of power is getting consumed. The issue will get solved with technology. We do not need this. Battery technologies have become much better. Average range of a vehicle outside of India is 400, 500 kilometers now. We are still stuck at 200, 250 kilometers as average. This needs to get changed, that the cars become better. The cars become better. We are talking about, we don't have a single car except for the high-ends, Mercedes, Audis, all of that. We don't have a MG ZS which can take a 120 kilowatt charge. Why do you need 20 kilowatt charging? Why do you need 30 kilowatt charging? Why can't it be ultra charging? Maybe the land issue at least gets solved, because in the same place I can dispense 4 times more energy. So we have to, I think, again, my whole issue will be around OEMs not innovating enough.
So you think the end game will have to be that charging technology itself gets a lot better so that fast charging can, be enabled for most models, and that frees up,
At
the
least it
land.
frees up the land. Load will still be an issue, but I think the charging efficiency and the cost to charge will become half if we can just get ultra high speed charging into the country. So I would request for that.
Right. Harsh, let me address two questions to you very quickly that I wanted to talk about. One is the technology aspect of the transition to sustainable mobility. We do know that there is one big power in the world, in the global economy, which controls a lot of technologies around the EV ecosystem. Do you think that we're collaborating enough to enable that technology to really trickle down to India as well? I believe recently we do see, some tech transfer agreements, licensing agreements do come through. Is there a need for more of that to happen in India to really expedite our own development of EVs? That is one. And secondly, when you look at our own market for electric mobility, do you think that there is a case to, for the OEMs perhaps, to start looking at building scale without, having discounted for subsidies. For example, we do know in the case of Tata Motors, they did see quite a steep decline in their EV sales to fleets when the subsidies went away. So the government now seems to be, mirroring that global direction of taking out subsidies as well. So these two things, how do you address those?
I think the technology transfer question is a tricky one, frankly. I think inherently in open markets there always is a reticence to share. Even within OEMs, I know, they believe that batteries themselves are proprietary to them. So I think inherently, for example, swapping was another thing that obviously is being experimented with. And there, again, the issue often is around the proprietary know-how of one battery versus another, right? So I think my sense is, make in India kind of philosophy narrative needs to continue even in this, while you can source some technology that you really can't just rely on others giving it to you, right? I think a lot of that investment needs to come in. Especially local OEMs need to continue. First, you need to see that this is a viable technology they want to go after, right? And as you said, demand may follow, but clearly they need to start investing behind what's available. And where it is available and with countries that you can make some of those bilateral agreements, I think one can continue to pursue that. I know our government has tried to incentivize some of that technology transfer, right? We know one of the large players that was interested still hasn't committed. And we had thought of putting in some favorable regulations for them, but I think
you can name the company.
We don't name any companies, right? So, yeah, but the jury's still out, right? If they will commit to it. So my sense is clearly one can't depend on others. Is the short story on that front. Sorry, the other question was around.
The subsidy scenario. So subsidies going away, and can we have scale without, needing subsidies, whether it's in the form of PLI payments or FAME subsidies?
Yeah, again, I think same. I think we need to let the market solve for this. As I said, the constraint to me, subsidies on the demand side has gone down, right? I think there are still other regulations that still favor other parts of entering into EVs, but my sense is you don't need to solve for all of the issues, not just the initial demand. I think on the LNG, I wanted to just make a point earlier that was raised that we did a study where we went and spoke to fleet owners, right? Especially long haul fleet owners. Again, evangelizing, obviously, they are aware of the benefits of LNG when it comes to long haul, as just inherently being a better substitute than CNG, for example, right? But I think some of the constraints that they raised, one was around the predictability of pricing on LNG, right? Yeah. Which is true across all fossil fuel. And the other is TCO, especially resale value, right? So a lot of these fleet owners, I think, clearly resale is a huge reason why they get into a technology or not, or get into an OEM, for example, or not, right? So if you start to solve for some of those as well issues, I think the adoption will start to pick up. As I said, it's not just the technology bit that is the constraint on any of these EVs, LNG. It's really other facets of the overall kind of life cycle of ownership.
Right. Absolutely. No, I think mobility is definitely a sector in transition at this point in time. But let me ask the audience if there are any questions at all for the panelists. You can raise your hands and we'll have a mic directed to you. To the gentleman right here. Please keep your questions short and address them directly to the panelists.
Sharma. I am a power professional though. One question that is, maybe the adoption is not there because new technologies are coming up, as you said. What about the fuel cell technology? Whether it is going to come soon? Because I'm not buying EV because of that. So there will be a lot of people like...
I think you'll have to wait a decade.
Okay.
Any other questions? Right behind.
This panelist discussed about financial sustainability, they have discussed about the technology, but the one very important issue is environmental sustainability of this vehicle, electric vehicle I'm talking. So if we talk from the life cycle assessment of electric vehicle, it is made from lithium basically. Lithium is the main raw material which is used for manufacturing of the batteries. So lithium has got a lot of environmental impacts. Whenever it is mined, if you go to the mining of, see the minings of lithium, there's a huge impact of environment on water pollution issues, air pollution issues, waste management issues. Then if you go to the plant where the batteries are manufactured, there is again a huge environmental impact. And when you dispose of your battery, again there is a huge environmental impacts. So if you do the life cycle analysis of all these things, so do you think that it is really an environmentally sustainable option to go for EV?
Who are you addressing the question to?
Any panelist.
Would you like to take that?
Sure. So I think what we want to do and what we are already starting to do is to do a lot of recycling. We have ourselves, not as Blusmart, but personally invested in a couple of companies which are doing very, very well. They are based out of Gurgaon and they are based out of Noida. Loham is a company that everybody will know. Loham is now producing in India recycled lithium 99.9% pure. There is Batex, which is just another 50 kilometers ahead. You should please visit their plants also while you are seeing how batteries are being made. And believe me, there is not even one bit of emission which happens in any cell manufacturing. And I've been to so many plants. When you go to Batex plant or you go to a Loham plant, and both of them are in Delhi NCR, you will see that absolutely very close to mined metal purity is coming out of these two plants. And India is actually going to become, courtesy these two companies and many more, India is going to be actually a leader in recycling of lithium-ion batteries. So once the recycling process starts, it's an endless process, and we do not expect to mine. Maybe another few million tons will get mined, but after that it's going to be all recycled. So I think it's not like carbon emissions which happen every time. Unfortunately, we can't recycle back carbon dioxide into fossil fuel, but we can recycle back lithium to get back lithium.
Thank you for asking that question. I think it was an important piece to address as well. We can take one more question right over there.
Yeah, my name is Mohammed Naseem. I'm from CMS Energy. I'll extend his question and I'll add some fact to it. Recently, I had an opportunity to attend the workshop at Massachusetts University, USA. And when I attended that workshop, I can tell you the lithium technology, I could feel it's already obsolete for them. And Microsoft and a lot of other companies have heavily invested. So I'll repeat the question what he has asked, that if something like lithium technology gets obsoleted, how we are prepared for it?
Hi, this is Priyal. I'll add to that. I think should we put all our eggs in one basket? We had LNG, CNG. We are talking about anyways the fossil fuels. They are not going to be anyway sustainable. Then we are talking about EVs. We know the issues with lithium. Mineral deposits are not going to be finite. Then we have hydrogen fuel cells and so on and so forth. Wouldn't it we say that with India being the world's biggest populated country, there are opportunity for these tech to be there. May the best survive. Some of them will run the course for 5-10 years. Some of them will run the course for 20-25 years. So that's the question. It's not about, so for example, the two-wheelers, the electronic e-bike is fine, but for buses, maybe hydrogen.
So technology, at least from what I understand, is not anything at a point in time. It's a continuum where we are continuously evolving and, getting better. So say when we talk about the CNG buses in Delhi, they saw a life cycle of 12 to 15 years. Now they are being replaced by electric. In another 10 to 15 years, the electric buses might be replaced by hydrogen cell. It's also to understand hydrogen cell is not a technology that is completely opposite that of an electric vehicle. Hydrogen cell, as far as I understand, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, will still be so as to say an electric vehicle with its charger moving along with it, so that it gets charged in real time. So any technology that I'm developing today for an electric bus does not automatically become obsolete if it gets replaced by a hydrogen cell. We'll still need to have a battery, may not be lithium, maybe some other thing, even like batteries that started in India for buses, somebody was doing sodium, somebody was doing lithium, and so on. Over time, we are understanding what is the best fit we want to be. So technology is a continuum. We are continuously growing, evaluating. Hydrogen is a very expensive, it is not going to be viable at this point in time. Another 5-10 years it becomes viable, we'll be ready for it. So it's a continuous evolving curve that we are on.
Thank you very much for taking the time and sharing your thoughts with us.